Good evening. This is the September 11, 2019 meeting of the East Long Meadow Town Council. We'll open the meeting now with a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence.
That flag's in the corner.
I can't even see it. That's what it was yesterday.
Oh, more. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We ask that you keep our nation's first responders, as well as the victims and their families of the attacks on the World Trade Center in 2001 in your thoughts and prayers this evening. Thank you. The purpose of this evening's agenda is to discuss the process going forward for the town manager search. And so since we have no public comments or council comments, I'm going to move right to number 5, the town manager search presentation and discussion. And I'm happy to introduce Mr. Bernie Lynch, the principal officer in the for Community Paradigm Associates, as well as his colleague from Community Paradigm, Sharon Flaherty.
Well, first let me start with the obvious. Thank you for having us here to be engaged in this project to help you find a new town manager. I was speaking with a couple members before the meeting started and talking a little bit about my own history in municipal government, and I was quickly advised that you knew my history, you've seen my proposal, and I appreciate the work that you all did in looking at the proposal and finding out a little bit about who we were and what we could bring to the town of East Long Meadow. But for the viewing audience, just so that they understand our backgrounds, my background or my experience is primarily in municipal government. I've been in municipal government for coming on 39 years. As I said to your department heads when I met with them earlier today, I know I don't look that's possible, but it is true. And most significantly, I served as the town manager, the first town manager for the town of Chelmsford. So I understand how a government transitions. Wasn't quite as dramatic, perhaps, as what you did here in East Long Meadow, and I actually give you tremendous kudos for developing a charter that put in place a council manager form of government. I think it's something that more and more communities are looking at, and you did to take that step. But I know the transition from going from one form of government, in the case of Chelmsford, it was a representative, it was an open town meeting with a weak town administrator who's actually had the title executive secretary, and went to a strong town manager position with representative town meeting. And I had the opportunity to serve in both capacities and be part of that transition. And that was certainly an interesting period to go through. I spent 20 years doing that before I moved on to become the city manager for the city of Lowell. And served almost 8 years in that capacity, which is a good long period of time for Lowell, where the average is more like 4 years. It makes me the third longest city manager in the city's history, going back to 1940. You have to go back to the 1950s to find someone who has served as long. So that was, I like to think we accomplished a great deal there, but I always point to my tenure as my ability to work with the council and get some good things done during a very difficult period of time of the city's finances, and particularly with the city going with the economic conditions of the time. So in 2014, I left that position because I wanted to do some other things, including increasing my teaching at Suffolk University, but also to participate in helping communities solve problems. And had the opportunity now to work with probably close to 60 communities across the Commonwealth on either recruitment or public management projects. But what brings us here today is to work with you on the recruitment of a new town manager. Sharon's background is in she can speak for herself, but I've got the floor, so I'll talk, is in journalism, communications, and so she worked with me on these projects. She'll be working on the development of the position statement that we'll be generating based upon our discussions today with you and with the department heads and other information we gather. And we're anxious to get started. By way of process, again, we've outlined it in the proposal that we gave you. Today's our kickoff day. We had almost a 2-hour meeting with the department heads today. I have to tell you, I was very impressed. They have a number of ideas, a number of thoughts regarding the town of East Long Meadow, and clearly a great commitment to the town that they serve. So we got some good information from them through the questionnaires and then the interviews today. And now we're looking forward to talking to you tonight. And what comes out of all this is that position statement, which many people look at it as just a marketing tool that we will use to distribute to potential candidates to have them apply for the job. And we do think that is very important. So we put a lot of time into that to make it look good. But I like to think of it too as a process by which a community can step back. It's been 3 years since you hired a town manager. When you hired your first town manager, you had certain needs. You had certain thoughts about what you wanted from that town manager. 3 years have gone by. You've had an opportunity now to work in this new form of government, or newer form of government, and now you might have some different ideas. You might have some thoughts about different skills you want, different work style, personality, and the issues of the town have changed, I'm sure, over that period of time. So we think it's a great process for a town to go through, whether it's a 3-year, since you hired a town manager. In one community, it had been 40 years since they hired a town manager. In that case, the gentleman was retiring at the age of 89. He felt that he'd had enough at that point in time, too. He was ready to go for an early retirement. It's a process you go through, and then what comes out of it, again, is that statement, which serves as an important tool to recruit, but also for your screening committee to evaluate potential applicants or applicants that come forward, and then for you to evaluate those the finalists when they come to you. So by way of process, we work on that, and then from that, we will bring it back to you, let you see it, make sure we're on the same page as to what we're looking for, and then we will go out and find you candidates. And we advertise here in Massachusetts, but we also generally advertise in the International City and County Management Association, which is a nationwide, international, but primarily the United States, looking for candidates that are interested in locating to East Long Meadow to work in the town. We'll work with your screening committee on narrowing the field, and hopefully be able to bring you 3 to 4 good candidates. Probably, I'm guessing we're probably looking at the middle of November to have that, assuming everything falls into place. So, and then hopefully have you having candidates that you can select by early December, and have someone on board January timeframe. That's the process in a nutshell, but we're here tonight primarily to answer your questions and also get your thoughts. We're here to listen to you about what you're looking for from a town manager. So.
Okay, so do you want to start first with any initial questions the council might have?
Well, let's start with, let me make one more comment. And then I'll start, then I'll ask a question. One thing to keep in mind, I gave you kudos for this form of government, and it's important in this form of government. I think the council manager form is a very successful one. It's the primary form of government across this country. There are more council manager forms than any other form of government. There are certainly council mayor forms, but we discussed that East Long Meadow is not a mayor type of community, and I commend you for that. Professional management is important, I think, in this day and age. It's for a variety of reasons. One of the primary reasons that, and I had as an opportunity as a in the teaching that I do, but also when I was city manager in Lowell, to speak to a number of communities about this form of government. That what really works with the council manager form of government is you as the legislative body participating with the manager as the executive, work together on the same page. If one isn't working properly with the other, the voters can take action, or the council can take action to head in a different direction. And I think that works very effectively. You need to have, I think the reason you brought us here, I assume, is that you want us to find you the right fit and the most talented and qualified person to serve in this role. And we feel confident that we'll be able to find you people. However, having said that, it is a tough market out there. Over the last 3+ years, half of the town administrator, town manager positions here in the Commonwealth have turned over because the baby boomers are all retiring. That's created a churn within the marketplace. So it's not as robust a pool of candidates as it used to be. Candidates are far more picky about where they go, and you have to compete to get people. So our job is really to find that candidate or those candidates that will be the right fit, but it's it's going to be work. And again, I assume that's why you brought us here to help you with that process. So I guess from the question I would throw out to the council to start is, what are the characteristics of the person you would like to hire? How would you define or describe the type of manager that you want? What type of experiences? What type of style? What are the big issues that you're facing from the way you function with? We'll get to the issues of the town, but what are the issues of the way you function as a governing body with your town manager that you would like to see in place?
Floor is open. This is more of a
Well,
less
if I may,
round.
I'll start the ball rolling. There's a number of individual characteristics that I have identified over the last several years being on the council, and they focus around, and not in an order of importance, but enthusiasm, cooperation, will to adapt, and a self-starter.
Okay.
I think those are important characteristics in any town manager. They shouldn't be sitting around waiting for direction from us, but they shouldn't be also going off on their own without consulting with us on important issues.
Okay.
So that's where the cooperation or the will to be a team player comes in.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, and the enthusiasm piece I think is important. We want someone, it's the same thing no matter what business you're in and what you do in life. If you don't want to get up in the morning and go to work, you're in the wrong job.
Mm-hmm.
So we want someone who wants to get up in the morning, who wants to come to work and wants to contribute.
Right. And wants to attack the challenges
Yeah.
that managing a community entails.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Through the chair. Some of the comments, I echo Tom's comments. Some of mine as well. I think experience is important as well. And so I'll throw my answer with a question to you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Do you find that somebody with a town manager experience versus somebody with a town administrator experience comes in differently? Because I think, just for the audience, and correct me if I'm wrong, a town manager is, as I said, is almost an appointed mayor, in effect. It's executive position. Where a town administrator is typically working under a board of selectmen.
Right.
You know, it's the next step beyond executive. So if you don't mind, through the chair,
No,
can I ask
that's
that
fine.
question?
No, that's a great question, and I wish there were an easy answer.
I kind of figured there wasn't.
Yeah, I mentioned when I was my first municipal management position was as an executive secretary, and it was which is a terrible title, but many communities had that
Right.
title back in the day, people would apply, and stressing how many words per minute they could type. And, obviously it was a different type of position, but that was the title that went with the position. There was a time when town administrators, so many executive secretaries then became renamed as town administrators, and they were still working under the direction of a board of selectmen that did all the appointing, had the contracting authority, had certain budgetary responsibilities. In many cases, those communities had a fragmented system of government in which you'd still have a lot of elected bodies. Over time, town administrators have been created in communities, and they have that title, but they have authority that goes beyond that. I'll give you an example of that. In one community that we did work for, they were hiring a town manager, and they were shocked to learn that one of their candidates had been a town administrator and had appointed every position, similar to East Long Meadow, appointed every position in the town. As a town in their community, the town manager did not appoint every position in the town. So you had a town administrator with very strong appointment authority, contracting authority, budgeting authority, and you had a town manager that didn't have many of those same responsibilities. So what's really important is really understanding in each case the form of government and the responsibilities or the level of authority that goes with that position. And that comes out, obviously we know pretty much every community in the state. I feel at this point like I've been to every community in the state, believe me. But we know many of those, but in talking to the candidates, we will get a handle on which ones have what type of authority. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that a town administrator wouldn't be a good fit to be a town manager. Again, it's going to depend upon the enthusiasm, the experience that they might have, and how long, how long they've been in the field. They might be ready. We were just in another community just yesterday where we were dealing with a town administrator, and he was there because he wanted to be a town manager. He said, I'm ready to move on. I'm looking for new levels of authority. I'm looking for new areas of responsibility. He had enthusiasm, and he was ready to go. Now, the decision will have to be made in that particular community whether he has the experience and right fit for that community. But he came in ready to move up. Again, drawing upon my own experience, as town manager, I mentioned that I was a very strong town manager in the town of Chelmsford. Not as strong as your town manager here in the town of East Long Meadow, but when I went to Lowell, Lowell, Worcester, and Cambridge operate under a Plan E form of government where the manager is the chief executive. Tremendous level of authority on all aspects, contracting, hiring, firing. There are mayors that don't have the authority that those managers have in the Commonwealth. So I think you can look at town administrators, but you really have to look at the position, the authorities they have, and then the experience that they have. You're not necessarily going to be, your field is going to be much smaller if you only count on finding a town manager to be a town manager. So I'd caution you to be a little bit broader in that way.
No, I am. I'm just saying if it was a 50-50 choice and somebody had the experience of basically managing a town versus administrating it on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, and all other factors, as Tom pointed out, being equal, then I would weigh it on that. That's just me.
And I would probably agree with you on that.
Right.
I probably would.
But I certainly wouldn't want to limit the talent pool on account of that, because there are some people who probably have an amazing administrative experience that, as you pointed out, are ready to take it to the next level. Right. And would be fine.
No, I think you make a great point. I couldn't agree with you more on that.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to offer Bernie to tag on to your remark about given our charter, the manager has a fair amount of power as outlined in the charter. it's safe to say that our charter also charges us with establishing a charter review committee in the coming months here, and we are about ready to create a bylaw to establish the charter review committee. There is sentiment among the folks who are active in town government, including our first manager, who would say that the charter was too strong in the powers that it gave to the manager, and that needed to come up for some consideration. So when I say it's fair to say, I'm certain that will be a topic of discussion with the Charter Review Commission when they are seated. The end result will be a product that whoever is the successful candidate will have to live with, if you will. He or she may come in under the present charter, but within a matter of less than a calendar year, have to adopt the tweaks that might be in the charter. And I'm confident that I can say this without putting words in the writers of the first charter, that I just lost my train of thought. It just went right out the window. I guess I wasn't as confident. It will not be the intent of the Charter Review Committee or the wish of the council to decimate the powers of the manager, but to having 3 years of reality under our belt to look at that seriously, and there will be some shifts,
Right.
but not so that it's a weak town manager in the council. It'll still be,
Yeah.
I think it'll still meet the definition of strong town manager, but with some tweaks.
Right. And that's one of those, that's going to be that could potentially be an issue. Because they're going to be coming in blind. We were talking about Amherst a few minutes ago as well. And we did the search in Amherst. And at the time we were doing the search, and of course it came at a very unfortunate time for the town of Amherst for a couple of reasons. One, their manager had passed away very unexpectedly. And the second is that they were in the middle of this whole charter discussion. And that was a question that candidates had. If I come in, now in that case it was a little bit more extreme because the prediction was that they were going to go council mayor. And that caused some concern for potential applicants that if they walked in there 2 years later when there was a mayor elected, what happens to them? That was an issue that Framingham grappled a little bit with, but their manager was nearing retirement when they switched over to a mayor. Very slim vote to do so. But you could run into a situation where people that are applying read up on this and have a little bit of concern. And so we'll have to, as we go through this process over the course of the next few weeks, try to get a better handle on what types of things could potentially be changed so that we can speak intelligently to applicants. One observation I'd make, one of the things we always, when we go out and promote our services to a community, is that we come in to do recruiting, but we also find ourselves helping in other ways, partly because I can't keep my opinions to myself. So hopefully you'll see that as a value add, and if you don't, you'll tell me. But one thing I would say is that having written several charters now for communities and worked with communities, one thing I would try to urge you to do, maybe a little bit, as a community, is not necessarily look upon a town manager having powers as much as a town manager having responsibilities. With authority comes responsibility. What I run into in many cases, and what many communities run into, it's not me, I just have to see it, is that communities will look to the town manager or town administrator in weak forms and say, why don't they fix X, Y, or Z? And so they're held responsible but they don't have the authority. So if there's you don't have this situation here, but if there's an elected board of something, and they do something that people don't like, then, people don't necessarily say, why is the board doing that? They'll say, why isn't the town administrator fixing that problem? The town administrator will say, well, I don't have the authority. So if there's an elected board of public works, which I've worked with in some communities, and they decide not to pave a road, the people still call up the town administrator and say, why isn't that road being paved? Well, that's not my call. Citizens don't necessarily see that. They see the town administrator as being the chief administrative official. They see the town manager as being the chief administrative official. And so they look to, or the chief executive official in your case, and they'll want to see that things are being done in a certain way. And so you want to make sure that as your charter commission goes through this, or your charter review committee goes through this, they'll have to sort of weigh that out. But that's just sort of I'll keep my opinions to myself now. Till the next opportunity.
Through the chair, I would not disagree with Kathy, but I would say that the Charter Review Commission will have a totally open hand.
Yeah.
It's even theoretically possible, as you know,
Right.
that they could say, we don't even like this form of government. We're going to
Sure.
go back to a weak administrator. I don't see that happening.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they have that power. So it's hard for
No,
us
they
to
don't
say.
have
They do not. They do not. They would have to start a whole charter commission over
Right.
again. And we would have to vote on electing a charter commission. They would have
Yeah.
to get the 1,600 signatures
Right.
and go through the whole
Yeah.
process again. So this is only a
But
review of the charter.
It's amazing the
tweak.
changes that they can make inside it, though.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't think that we can decide what they're going to do. I think right now, we like the town manager, strong town manager concept. I know I do. It could be possible that the person that we had as town manager did not work well within that, the balance between initiative, as Tom said, and working
Okay.
with us.
Right.
It could be that that is the major problem, and that another person with a different style might work
That's
with
right.
us
Yep.
with the same powers and still keep us more informed to sort of make us comfortable
Right.
about what they're
Right.
doing. So I would hate to dissuade,
Right.
from my perspective only, I would hate to dissuade anybody from thinking that we're going to make a major change
No, that,
in it, you know,
Right.
and just because that may not happen.
Right.
It may be the
and
person.
if, I hope that was not the intent of what I said. And I'm just stating the obvious that
That's out there. That we
That's
should-
out there. Yep.
that
Right.
commission is going to meet sooner than later.
Right.
And that the charge is, by definition, to edit and tweak.
Sure.
But tweak, not dismantle or redesign.
Who appoints the charter review?
It'll be the council.
The council.
Council.
Okay. That's what I would assume,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure in that case. And I know there was another community I was working with that actually it was I think the manager appointed. And I think what ended up happening is because they wanted to make sure that there was consensus, the manager asked in that case it was the Board of Selectmen, to give him names of people that they wanted, and there was a joint effort.
Through the chair, just to add on to that conversation, I think what's important in moving forward and understanding this issue, which is an elephant in the room.
Sure.
We all know that, but I don't think any of us here see a major rewrite of the charter.
Right.
We've seen over the past several years a need for some change.
Sure.
And some of those are very minor, like shall and may. Those are dangerous words.
Yes.
And they need to be corrected one way or the other.
Right.
In addition to that, the town manager can, if they have the authority to do something. But there's consequences to any decision you make.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So if you choose to make a decision which impacts the town, I mean, none of us live outside the town. We all live in the town.
Right.
We know what's best for our town. And a town manager that currently or in the past didn't live in town doesn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a need to bring that before us and talk to us about it
Right.
as an appointment of different committees.
Mm-hmm.
we know the people in town. We've all served on many boards and commissions in the past. We know the people that are willing to step up and work for the right reason.
Right.
And in my opinion, I think some of the appointments that were made in the past by the former town manager should have come before the council. And,
Okay.
and some of that is in the charter.
Okay. All right.
Through the chair.
Certainly.
Question, actually.
Sure.
Candidates from the private sector. You've dealt with a lot of screenings and everything. Do you find that the private sector can offer a good candidate based on, let's say, their past being possibly a CEO or running a company? I mean, I look at our town as a $60 million company.
Right.
That needs to be run properly.
Right.
I look to, I mean, I've been a business owner for 38 years. There's a huge difference between public and private sector.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, are we going to see candidates from both, or are they all going to be past town managers or administrators?
We have placed some people in positions, or helped place people in positions that are private sector. I will tell you, though, that generally speaking, when we work with screening committees, for instance, which you're going to appoint a screening committee, right? And they will say, or we'll have, we've actually had a couple boards of selectmen, they'll say, we want someone out of the box. We want someone to look, we want to look at the private sector. And we're certainly willing and able to, do that. What we find, though, is once they come in, those people from the private sector, straight in, if they don't have any municipal experience, they struggle with the interview and with the public process that's different. I guess the way I would best describe it is if you were looking for the CEO of a financial services business, you wouldn't hire this, you wouldn't reach out and hire someone who had a background in plastics. You'd look for someone who had worked their way up to the financial services industry. Likewise, when you're hiring someone to be a town manager, you'd like them to have some understanding and background in municipal management and municipal services. There is different sets of rules, different processes. Nothing shocks some people more than the transparency of government and the rules of government. They're rules for a reason, but sometimes they can be very cumbersome to go through. So you want to make sure. The one particular successful story that comes immediately to mind is someone who came from a very strong accounting background and moved into a manager position, but they did so after having about 15 or 20 years serving on a board in their community, their finance board in their community. So they understood municipal finance, they understood management, they understood the organization. If you will, their service in that finance board gave them the understanding of all the different aspects that was important. So I think someone with that type of private sector experience is much more likely to be successful and much more likely to apply. But certainly, I'll tell you another group that we always look to, military. Someone who's got some leadership skills in the military. We've had some outstanding candidates that have served in the military and then moved into municipal positions in other communities that then we've brought over to. They've been very impressive to look at.
Yes, I do know the charter lays out guidelines as far as certain experience and all, but it does give the council latitude as far as a choice on it.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for the question happens to be, I look at a lot of mayors that are elected, and they have absolutely no public experience, and they're elected to run a town and basically be the CEO of the town.
Sure.
And now all of a sudden, because they've been mayor somewhere for 3 years, now they have public experience, which would fit into us. It seems like we may be able to skip, that one little section if the candidate was right. And that's the only thought process.
Yeah, and again, if the candidate is right, that's
Absolutely.
the only caveat. I couldn't agree more, because we've actually, as you might expect, you'll hear this a lot from me, we've placed mayors. The mayor of Melrose we placed into the position in Linfield. The mayor of Attleboro we didn't place, but he's now the manager of Mansfield. Very successful in what he's doing. The mayor, I was involved with the mayor of Revere going in to become, I chaired the search committee that moved him into the manager of Chelsea. So it can work, but they need to have that. There are some mayors that are hands-on mayors, and each one of those were hands-on mayors. They were actually the ones at the bargaining table. They were actually the ones running the department head meetings. They didn't have a chief administrative officer that worked for them that did that. So, but that's a good example.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Kathy, I'm more interested in the process and being sure we have enough time to go through the process.
Sure.
These questions and answers are great, but I'm interested in all the steps, because this is probably the last time we have to look at the whole sequence.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we can spend some time on that, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
So with that, if I have 2 more seconds,
Sure.
You asked what we're looking for.
Yes.
Myself, I'm looking for someone with strong communication skills.
Okay.
I want someone who will get back to the public when they make inquiries, not in 2 weeks, not in 3 weeks. Maybe after 2 emails or 3 emails, hey, there's a response.
That's a good thing to do.
Absolutely, and it's very difficult because you get tied up with stuff.
Sure.
And time management skills
Right.
is another huge process that I look at. And in all honesty, I look for someone who's fiscally conservative.
Okay.
I want someone who can look at a budget, analyze the budget. The taxpayers want the most they can get for their money. And I think part of our job is to make sure that they get that.
Right.
And it's the town manager who compiles the budget, who submits it to us for us to start reviewing of it. And I'm looking for a good budget right off at the top.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can I ask you another? That might be a great opportunity for me to ask a couple of questions that come immediately to mind that I'm interested in. As a council, do you set annual goals for yourself and for the organization? Okay, all right. And those are codified in some way that if we wanted to.
We set the goals, the annual goals for the manager.
Okay.
We have not, as a council, actually taken ourselves through the process of setting our own goals.
Okay. And I guess by your own goals, I certainly there are some, I guess you break into certain categories, right? There'd be your own goals, what you want to accomplish as the way you organize and operate. There's the manager goals of what you want the manager to do in a given year. And this sort of ties in together, I guess, with the community goals. What drives the budget process? If the budget should be seen as more, again, my opinion's coming out here, but the budget should be seen as more than just a spreadsheet with a bottom line. It's what are you getting for the money you're spending? You're running a $60 million business. The important thing isn't the 60 million. The important thing is what are you getting for the 60 million? So I'm just wondering if there's do you use your budget document as a strategic plan for this corporation? You are a corporation. So, and that's something I guess I was just wondering if you've done that. And along those lines, do you have a policies that you've set as a body for the manager and for the operation of the town?
A policy in what way?
Financial policies, personnel policies, policies that may govern the way you interact, at least tie with goals, with how your organization interacts with the public. There's a variety of different ways you can look at that. Your policy, your charter may actually speak to this, and I don't have the charter right in front of me. The council acts through the policy directives, and the manager has to toe the line and make those policies a reality and implement those policies. So,
Who wants to?
Well,
just so we can refer to those
Yes.
as we talk to
one
you.
thing that Kathy mentioned is we do set the goals of the town manager
Okay,
based on what we believe as a council
okay,
needs to happen going forward in the town, and the things that the town manager needs to follow.
okay,
I have a copy for
Perfect.
you, which I can give you.
excellent.
And I think it's important to have, like anyone else in any position, to have goals and objectives in your job, so you know whether you're doing a good job or you're not doing a good job.
Right.
On that point, what we were talking about earlier with potential charter changes is a lot of things can be remedied in a contract.
Mm-hmm.
A contract speaks for what the expectation is going forward of that individual.
Right.
So we don't want anyone to not step up. But if they're that shy, I'll use that term,
Yeah.
and they're not willing to take a risk, then maybe they're not the right person.
Right. So you want to risk? We don't want anyone, any evil Knievel types.
No.
But we want someone that steps out to try to make things happen. The self-starter that you
Yeah,
refer
a
to.
self-starter,
Right.
not wait for direction from the council.
Right.
If there's something that needs to happen, again, if it affects the community, since we're out in the community, and we're the ones, and I've used the story in the past,
Yeah.
I got pulled backwards in a grocery store
Yeah.
by someone who had an issue, and it was like, I'm on my happy way moving my cart down the aisle, and I got pulled to a stop
Sure.
to be asked questions. I mean, we are the faces of the community.
Right.
The town manager sits behind the desk and they go home. They may or may not live in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an issue for all of us. So we need to make sure that.
That's what I want.
Yes.
Yeah.
and I'm not going to urge you to enforce the residency provision, because I think that limits your field dramatically. In this market, that's problematic in particular. There are a number of other reasons why you may not want to do that. But one thing that we're hearing from many communities, and I know that in my own experience, I tried to become a member of the community, whether I lived in the community or not. I had the situation where I lived in the communities I managed, and I didn't live in the communities I managed, but I was always part of the community. Is that something you would like to see from your next manager, that they be part of the community? You're the face of the vote of the residents. You're the elected people, but many boards and councils now are looking to the manager to be someone who is out and about and understands the people of the community. Is that something you see as an
I would say yes, especially if you're saying that we tie ourselves to a less than attractive candidate pool by saying you must live in this community.
Right, right. I'll give you and this is sort of a funny situation, but one of the communities that we did some work for, and I won't name it, but one of their biggest issues was that they wanted their manager to march on the 4th of July parade. They wanted the people to see their manager. And the manager refused. Says, no, that's my day off, and I'm not an elected official. That's not what I do. I don't march in parades. I'm not saying that, that is really the biggest issue in the world, certainly, whether they march in the parade or not. But it was very big in this town that they wanted someone that they felt connected to. People could see and feel that that those people cared about their town. Someone that's out and about, that's, members of a civic organization, goes and speaks to the PTO, goes and, out and participates at community events. Is that something you'd like to see?
I would say unequivocally yes, from my perspective.
And through the chair, I would say that that's possible. You can find that person who might not live in the town, but be willing to do that.
Right.
That would be the only way I would want to see a non-resident.
Yeah. Okay,
And
that's
and
great.
we recognize that,
Yeah.
depending on, and again, age can never be a consideration, but candidates who are, middle-aged or a little bit older,
Right.
and aren't residents, but maybe in the area, it would be burdensome, I imagine, to say, move into town. Whereas if you get a candidate who's at the earlier stages of a career with a young family, they may, of their own volition, feel it's important to move into town and grow the family and their roots there. So we recognize that.
Yeah. And it's funny, there are some managers that feel very important to that. Of course, the whole, the economics are so much different now than they were 30 years ago. And I realize this is a new position here in the town, of only 3 years, but dual income households. Everybody needs a dual income household, it seems now. So it's difficult sometimes, particularly for younger, if their spouse works in Amherst, and they need something, sort of in between. But to have someone that is, they're in between, but they're over here, out and about.
Right. I would say that would be an acceptable trade-off to residency.
I just want to make one comment. I think the word, I would use the word, I'd phrase it as vested. We'd like to see somebody vested in the community.
Yes.
And the definition of vested doesn't necessarily mean that they need to reside in East Long Meadow, but we as a council can form boundaries. They might be state limited or whatever we decide, but once we have those applicants that come forward, I think the decision will be pretty easy to make.
And I think that's a great term, to be vested.
I'd like to see someone who is collaborative, and I know that is a buzzword that's probably overused on resumes
now, right.
and in conversation. Collaborative only goes so far if you're willing to compromise.
Right.
And I think we were challenged in that department in recent months.
Okay.
So to me, if an individual or a candidate says, I'm all in, I'm collaborative, I'm going to ask, give me an example of where you collaborated, but then compromised on something that wasn't necessarily where you started from.
Right.
I'd like to add one other piece through the chair, please. In response to your question when you were asking what we'd like to see, I know you spent time with numerous department heads throughout the town, and for the most part, I would say we have a high quality of people that work here. So I would like to see the manager coming forward spend a little bit more time with these department heads and take into consideration what they have to offer, being here on a day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis. Right. They have lots of information that I'm sure they'd like to open up with and share that. So also, all our department heads aren't contained in one section of a building or in that specific building. Our police department is off premises. Our fire department is located in a different part of town. Then you have our town hall. Right. We have a department head that works down here. We have a school system.
Right.
So I'm just saying that I would like to see that manager get outside the facility, visit the other facilities, and spend a fair amount of time with all our department heads to gather all the information necessary to come up with the best product.
Yeah, and I did spend a couple hours with your department heads today. Very impressive group of people, and it is important, I think, for the manager to be able to be out and about. And I guess that goes with the saying, I often use the sort of the extremes. There was a point in time when managers were all sort of the green eye shade people, You know, my apologies to anyone here that's a green eye-shaped person, but you know, someone who would sit there and pore over spreadsheets in an office. We were working with another town recently where that's what the manager did. Door closed, didn't talk to anyone, never held department head meetings, never left there. And then you have the other type of manager that's out and about and all over the place. That could be a problem too, because if residents come in and their manager's never there, or they're out at some event or another, you don't want that. So you want something in between, but I do think that there's a move away from the person who just locks themselves in a room and pores over the spreadsheets.
Well, balance is what you're driving at. But,
Right.
you know, not just open door policy at the town hall, venture outside and
Right.
view the other facilities where these department heads and their staff are working,
Yeah.
and get a better spectrum on the big picture,
Right.
if you will.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. By the way, if you notice, I'm not taking notes. Because Sharon's taking the notes. Because Sharon's doing the writing. So.
Through the chair, I just had a couple more follow-up comments on communication and also involvement. First of all, I mean, as you get to know this community, I mean, we do things differently than you're going to find from other communities. We're really out there. I mean, we had the 125th anniversary in this town, and it's still going on. I mean, the
Okay.
party doesn't end. We have
Yeah.
the 4th of July parade, very big. Amazing civic organizations like the Rotary Club, Lions Club, I could keep going.
Sure.
Who puts on concert series and so forth. We have a tree lighting ceremony as well. And that's one of the strong points of the previous town manager, was the fact that you would see her there.
Okay.
You would see a national night out
Yep.
be present as well. So to us, the fact that the town has had this historical commitment to creating this sense of community and being very out there with it, you know, with parades and fireworks and things like that, I think it would be we would like to have somebody, at least, again, I'm speaking for myself, but I think I am echoing the rest of the council, somebody who's going to be reflective of, I mean, who's going to be an example of that. The person, if we put this out there, not to say, I'm off the clock, I'm done with you.
Right.
You know, the green-eyed type person. So the other thing that's also important, and I think it goes along the same line, and I noticed that in our first hiring position at time, and one of the reasons that I voted for the previous town manager is I think it was very clear this was the end goal. This is the job. This isn't the AAA to get to Fenway Park. And I picked up, and I could be wrong with some of the other candidates, that this was a transitory position.
Sure.
That if a position elsewhere opened up, that's where I'm going. So I think if, again, maybe too much to ask, but to somebody who goes, I want this job, and not at the same time having an eye on Springfield or some other place, you know. So that weighed in my decision in voting. Thought I'd share that.
Yeah. No, and I think that that is important. You need someone that's going to be committed to the community. You know, if they're early in their career, are they going to necessarily spend 20 or 30 years? Maybe not.
No, but my point again through the chair is that at this point in time,
Right.
they're not showing their cards.
Right.
Basically, I mean, you could almost have a mirror reading the cards, going, no, I want to. My goal is to be closer to the central part of the state, or to be up near a state up north, or something of
Right.
that nature, for the sake of discussion.
Right.
You want somebody, you can't project where they're going to be 10, 15, even 3 years, but in good faith.
Right.
Right now, they really believe and convey and will act accordingly. This is an amazing job. This is an amazing community, and reflect that.
Okay. Yeah.
Would you be able to walk us through the process a little bit on where we go after tonight in regards to the search?
Sure. Well, what we hope to do after tonight is, as I said, to draft up that position statement and then get that back to you. What I may want to do, and I'll probably work through Council President to do this, is to get all of your phone numbers and speak to you individually a little bit about any questions that I have. Give you another opportunity to talk, and add some of those additional comments into the position statement. And then once you approve that position statement, we do several things. One, we advertise, we recruit, and I think that's what's significant. If this was just a matter of putting an ad in the paper or putting an ad in the MMA, you could do that yourself. You wouldn't need us. Hopefully we're here because we have some expertise in what municipal management's all about. We have a network. And we do have a very extensive network built around the work we've done in other communities, as well as my involvement, as well as other people that work with us, their involvement in municipal management. We will find you candidates. Generally, we like to have that process of advertising and recruiting take about 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. Since you've notified us that you've brought us on, which was a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, we've already been making phone calls. We have people already anticipating this position and planning to apply. Now you're competing with other communities because there are a number of communities out there looking. So right now I'm thinking that we will probably be able to sit down with your screening committee in, as I think I indicated, probably late October, early November, and bring in, I don't hide anything from I have to hide it from you in terms of the resumes because we need to maintain the confidentiality of these resumes. So once it goes to you, it's no longer confidential under the open meeting, the public records law. So we will go sit down with the screening committee though, because they can look at these resumes, and we will go through each and every candidate with them. And we basically put the candidates into different tiers. We'll say this is a tier 1 candidate. They meet all the qualifications. They are, someone that you want to look at. We'll put another group of people into tier 3. They're the people who maybe just finished college. Maybe they, for whatever reason, they don't have the qualifications. They don't really have the background. And then we'll have the interesting. And that's often where we pick up the people in the military, the people in the business. They may not be managers, but there's some good candidates in there that maybe you should take a look at. And they have some background. Now, they might be department heads in a community. They might be working in state government. They might be working in regional government and dealing with the types of issues that you're having here. They may be coming, as I say, out of the private sector, out of the military. Let's take a look at those as well. And then from that, we will work with the screening committee to narrow those people, that field down to probably about 7 people. We'll come out here, we'll spend probably a day doing interviews with your screening committee. I think that's what we've actually called for in the proposal, is we'll sit down for a day and we'll interview 7 people. And from that, they will pick, hopefully, 3 people to send on to you. In working with the screening committee, we'll help them with questions. We have interview questions that we'll develop for them. We'll have background work already done. We will not have contacted their references as of yet. We've done criminal history background checks, but we'll do other background work so that we have a story for each one of the candidates. And so they'll go into this with eyes wide open and an understanding of what they're looking for. But then we'll bring those 3 people to you, but before they come to you, we'll do the reference checks. You will get a report on each candidate with what people say about them, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. They're public documents, so we try to be very careful with exactly how we phrase some of this. But we'll have experiences, so to the point of, someone's collaborative. Well, give us an example. So we'll have an example from a reference as to how they're collaborative. And we'll put that in front of you and then help you interview the candidates and make a choice. and then we stand ready to assist you with your negotiation of any contract that you would be doing.
Well, that's helpful for us to even form the screening committee, because now we've kind of defined the parameters and the time that it would be expected from people to step up.
You know, some people are busy, and to be a member of the screening committee, you know, you want to get the best people, and you know, the best people are often the busy people, and so I don't want people thinking that they're going to have to be out 2 nights a week for 2 months.
Exactly.
This is probably going to be, oftentimes it's one meeting to organize and review resumes, and then a day to do interviews. Their work is done. They've done what you asked them to do, identify the candidates for you. And so we try to make it as easy as possible for them to do that.
Thanks.
What are the major, I know you have a commitment, you're at
8 o'clock.
At 8 o'clock, but what are the major issues facing the town in your mind? I think I've heard some of it already, you know, there's fiscal constraints. Some of those may be sort of self-imposed, desire to hold that. Other communities, so some communities have major financial problems. I don't see where East Long Meadow has any major financial problems. But you want someone that runs a tight ship. So we're looking for that. Do you feel that there's still you're at a point where it's still a relatively new form of government, that you need someone to help with the continued transition of this implementation of this form of government?
I think we've fulfilled pretty much the directive, the will of the charter.
Okay. Okay. All right. In terms of economic development, is economic development an issue?
And that might fall under the classification of staffing at this time. I would say staffing is a concern of mine at this point in time.
Staffing with regards to economic development?
Different functionalities of the town, to include planning.
Okay. All right. So,
Other areas. Well, I would say HR, because we do not have an HR person.
yeah, I heard that today from the department. And
Obviously,
that's,
infrastructure needs to be completed probably prior to a selection of an employee. So, and
Okay.
we are working on that aggressively.
right. Yeah, and that's, yeah.
We did, the charter required an HR department, and we had an initial individual in it who left us after about a little more than a year. So we're in between
Right. Okay.
and struggling a little bit with that.
Right, and you want to have someone that understands, again, this is where municipal, there's a whole other world of civil service law and Chapter 150E, collective bargaining laws, how health insurance and other benefits, pension systems, all that works. It's different than, you know, OPEB liabilities, things like that. It's important.
And I think you put the finger on one of our potential weaknesses, and that's that we haven't updated our master plan for a very long time.
Okay.
And we are in the process of trying to do that. But that means that there's less of an overall guidance for the budget than there might be if there was a more clear master plan. So we all have very good feel for the various departments and the needs, but when it comes to an overall vision, that piece is still missing, and it would help us. I think we do a good job with the budgeting and a good job on targeting the dollars, but it might,
Yeah.
it's something that we know is missing, it's something we're working on.
Okay. You mentioned you know the sort of the needs. So what would some of those need? So for instance, do you have any facility needs? Do you have a nice senior center? Do you have a nice library?
I'll take
How much
that.
time do you have?
Oh, see, this is good. What are your facility needs?
As I shared with you on the phone some time ago, we have an aging high school who, and our superintendent and school committee have submitted letters of interest
Right.
to MSBA for multiple years on end. And we are now on our 6th or 7th statement of interest. And each year, of course, there's limited monies in MSBA, but it seems as though we're climbing closer to that magic moment when we may get the nod
Okay.
to enter the eligibility stage. That said, should that happen in the next year or two, we're looking at the potential for $110 million debt exclusion or some other way to finance.
That,
I'm sorry, wait, with reimbursement.
Okay.
60 plus.
okay.
60 plus, but $110
Total
million
cost. Right.
high school.
Right, okay.
And that came up in our budget hearing, public hearing, that, you know, be careful, voters would say to us, be careful where you place this tax rate.
Right,
Because if we get the nod to go forward with a new high school, we know that's going to add another $2 or $3 to the tax rate, and you're going to kill us all.
right.
So that is out there.
Okay, all right. So that's a
That's the,
reason for,
Yeah.
well, right, that's a reason for what the fiscal
That,
response.
responsible.
Conservatism, yeah.
Right, the conservatism, the management of that. You know, I guess it also goes back to a question I had about economic development. If there are more, I know, now, for instance, I know that there's the 332
330 Chestnut.
330 Chestnut. That's a major
That's a
development
huge one.
that could bring in a large amount of revenue for the town that could help sort of push that tax rate down and help pay for that school if it were to become a reality. Okay.
through the
You
chair.
started to talk a little
I
bit
did.
more about
Well,
facilities.
I'm going to start with 330 Chestnut.
Okay.
It would be a great thing if it's done correctly.
Right.
A mixed-use development is something that the whole town has to get on board with. But with that said, I don't believe it's just the high school.
No,
I believe our
there's-
whole school system, many of the schools are getting older.
Right.
And the high school, I think, was the one that they identified as
The most
the
needed.
most in need of it. But we're going to be right behind with a couple other schools
Okay.
after. We have the police station that I believe we have a feasibility study right now to look at.
That's to make more improvements than a new building. Am I correct?
Well, that's
We
what
don't know
our
that.
study is all about.
Okay.
That would be the intent of the study, to say,
Okay.
replace, rehab / expand, you know, so we look to the judgment of the feasibility study to guide that. But to Ralph's point about other schools, there are 5 schools in total. So we've spoken about the high school. We have 2 elementary schools who are recipients of accelerated repair funds from MSBA for windows, doors, roofs. We had some help with heating systems a couple years ago. So, yes, the buildings, the 2 elementaries, with the exception of the middle school, let me do it from the reverse, that's only 20 years old. All the other buildings are heading into the 40 to 50 year range.
Okay, all right, okay. So the police station, the schools,
I meant, when I made that statement, I was speaking strictly of the schools.
right,
So 4 schools
4
are
schools.
aging rapidly.
okay.
And the town hall suffers from,
And
we just need more space somehow.
we are
Yeah.
struggling for space inside the town hall to cite all of the departments that need to be there.
But we have a fine office for the manager.
Okay, very
And
important.
it
That's
has
the most
to-
important thing, you know. So,
It has a lovely view of the Rotary, which can be a total distraction, because that in
I know-
itself
I
is
know
like
about
sitting
that
at the
Rotary.
airport
Yeah.
and people watching.
Right, right. I know about that Rotary.
And then you talked about, well, I talked about fiscal responsibility. The state mandates a $25 per thousand cap.
Right.
And we are at 22 roughly.
67.
So we're creeping up towards
Right.
it,
Sure.
and that's a concern because the state said you can't go above it.
Right.
So you know, what happens if we get closer? I believe Long Meadow is at 24.
Knocking at the door.
And they're knocking on the door, and we're right behind them. So that's where my thoughts come from. How do we get the most for our dollar and make it go the farthest and give the citizens what they want?
Right. Yeah, there's a number of communities that are now up against, increasing number of communities that are up against that, and I don't know if anyone ever really, you go out, you go east, there aren't as many. There's really
property values are up, so the tax rates are down.
And nobody really saw this back in 1980 when the law was passed.
Right.
So nobody thought it was possible.
Through the chair, another, just segueing on comments recent about, even Chestnut or any other project. And correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the town pays on an average $15,000 per student, right?
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a fair assessment. Yeah.
Okay, say $15,000 a student. So even if you have, $400,000 house or so forth, you might be collecting $8,000, $9,000 in taxes. So if you have 2 kids there, you're still losing money. You have $30,000, you're making $9,000. So one of the challenges is to keep the empty nesters in East Long Meadow, because they're helping to pay for the schools and helping to pay for things. So we have to keep the budget constraints aren't so much as proper, financial management. It's also not having that push out to say, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to Enfield, Spring, or somewhere else. Right. And then that house where it was generating money is not. Right. So that's the other part about the Chestnut project is, the original draft was asking for 800 units. So that, let's just say on average 1.5, maybe 2 people per unit, you're increasing the voting population of East Long Meadow by that one project by 10%. So if it becomes a family-friendly project, which may not be, maybe, but let's say it is. We have to be prepared for both sides. The $100 million project may, at the end of the day, be costing the town in terms of having to build even more schools, accelerating things. It all depends on that. So there's a lot behind the scenes more than the dollar amount. Just to let you know about that.
Yeah, and every community has to sort of manage its way through that, and it can be a problem if it's not done properly. Right. At the same time, you don't want to be in a position where the really tragic stories are communities west, where the students are all leaving after so the communities are dying.
Well, there's a balancing act on that. But East Long Meadow still is a very desirous community. It's been voted the last few years #1 community to live in. I believe Reader's Raves by the Mass Live or whoever put that together, Springfield newspaper. So we may not have the newest high school, but we have programs that other schools don't have, and so forth, like a tremendous robotics program and things of that nature. So there's a lot of attractions in East Long Meadow beyond necessarily the brick and mortar. And going back to the police department, if you're friends with the governor, if you are, maybe nudge a little bit to sign that piece of paper for the $1.1 million to do renovations and work to the police station that's been sitting on his desk. Right. So that leads me to my next point, and one of the skills that I think we should have is somebody who is attuned to getting grants, getting funds, getting money outside of taxpayers. I apologize.
That's a grant.
That's a grant. That's the grant people said. You rang? Wait, is that a camera over here? Yes, we want some money now. That was probably the governor listening in on me. But that's my point, is getting that opportunity to look outside of the four corners of just the tax revenue, but looking at other ways to get money to us, because God knows we get enough unfunded mandates.
Absolutely. Well, that's, again, a great point, and one that your department heads are very big on it today, is the idea of someone that knows how to grab some of that grant money from different locations, and someone that can support that. And then what came out of that too is someone that's connected to the funding sources that are out there, and connected to the other municipal organizations that are out there that work on behalf of municipalities.
Right.
So again, going back to that community that I mentioned earlier, where the manager, was locked in his office. Those townspeople came to us and said, we want someone that gets out and about and pushes our community for state money, for best practices, that learns how we can do things, that steals ideas from other communities of how things are happening and how to improve. And that's that's a very important skill to have and an ability to have that. So, okay. What else?
Well, another issue is the issue of communications. If you look around, we have our East Long Meadow cable access here, and 0 people from the media, 0. And I think this is all across the state in areas that aren't named Boston, Worcester, Springfield, and so forth, or even Pittsfield. Less and less people are reading the newspaper and getting their news through social media,
Right.
or through here. So to me, that's another skill that's important, is somebody who is willing to embrace the times. We need to be aware that as we attract younger people to this community, that we need to have somebody who's going to put this as a priority of finding other strategies to get the message of the good work, of the necessary stuff that's being done by the government of East Long Meadow out, beyond a simple static Facebook page.
Right.
We need to have more of a social media presence and stuff, because to put our eyes, believing that if you post something in the local newspaper, they're just going to come, you might be seeing, poor turnouts.
Right.
So I think it's someone who understands that the good works that are being done are really, the townspeople deserve to know about that. And the typical ways that were done as recent as the early 2000s and the 90s and so forth. I mean, we used to have a dedicated reporter here. Now we don't.
Right.
And so I think understanding communication, of getting the message, meetings, events, and so forth throughout the whole strata of social media, or come up with other ideas,
Right.
is something, and maybe even, embracing even further the message of LCAT. I mean, I was just at Dunkin' Donuts today, as he points out, you get stopped, and a person came up to me and he saw the subcommittee meeting.
Right.
And he commended the work that the committee was doing and applauded and so forth. So people are finding a way to go on to, LCAT, East Long Meadow Cable Access, through either the television channel or through, through YouTube. So that's important, is somebody who's not tied in such ways of the past, but not willing to embrace the ways necessary to move forward.
Okay. Great.
I know we've talked about it already, but I think management, a true leader, a manager of people, is vital to this town. Not someone who sits and dictates, not someone who sits and allows the department head to do what they want, but provides a vehicle for everyone to provide input and then makes a decision. Leadership.
Okay. Someone that inspires.
Yeah.
Very good. I think that gets us, we've already gone through one pen. So on to the second. No, I think that gives us some very good information. And we will go back and start working on our strategy. And we'll be back in touch to be back to see you.
Good.
Or to send it on to you to approve. So, right.
Okay.
We are working right next door right now, so we're out here a little bit, so we'll,
And you've survived the Rotary at least once.
yeah, so far.
That's always a good sign.
So far.
Maybe that should be a trait for a candidate, try the Rotary out.
Right, right. Well, I don't know if you were there today, but I talked to the department heads after, it may have been right after you left. I can't remember if you were still there, but when I know I love to tell my stories, but when I was town manager in Chelmsford, we had an intersection that was 1 acre of pavement.
Wow.
And there were, I believe, 8 roads that all came together. No stop signs, no traffic signals. It was a free-for-all. So the bumper stickers used to be, I survived chicken corner. And because it was all chicken, how you made it through. We did ultimately put in traffic signals and shrunk that down, but it brought back, it was a flashback for me going through there today. So it wasn't quite as bad though as that, but it's a tough rotary. So, all right.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments?
So through the chair, our next job would be to look to appoint a committee.
Yes. Bernie and I had a phone conversation over the weekend about the composition, what does the screening committee look like? But what I took away from that most important is to avoid appointing a committee ASAP and then having too great of a window of downtime where either they get restless or go off on rogue business, if you will.
Right.
And which can defeat the purpose of the intent of their mission.
Right.
So if you're saying we need a committee to be seated for the latter part of October,
Correct.
we still have some breathing room to develop an ad that will go on our website as well as in the local paper.
And what I can send you,
If you have
it's
something-
helpful,
yeah.
we can do an ad for you or something of that sort. We also have developed a committee charge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever
But
use
we'd
something
love to
like
see
that.
it.
Yes.
We can send that on and you can work it as you see fit, but it lays out exactly what is expected and what their role is. Yeah, I mean, we've run into, as we were speaking this weekend, we've run into a couple times now where road committees, they suddenly decide to take on the responsibility of the council in determining what type of person is right for the community. You're the elected people. You're the ones that have to make that decision. So we've been, if they come in too early in the process, it's before you've really laid out exactly what we're looking for. And we think that's
So I
important.
think we've got some time to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was just looking as far as if there was any thoughts as far as the size of a committee that you look for.
Yeah.
A mix of council members, citizens. I mean,
I-
is there any perfect?
I do have all that in notes that I captured from
Oh,
our
great.
conversation
Okay.
that I will put in an email to all of you.
Good.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, yeah.
In our former review committee was 5.
It was, you were on it?
I was on it.
Okay,
And there was 1 council.
Yep.
And then 4 residents.
okay.
Yeah, and that's a good size. I usually say 5 to 7.
Mhm.
We've worked with as much as 11, and I would discourage you from doing that. It gets too big, too cumbersome, and scheduling becomes impossible. And that's important. It's it's because you have a process and you want to move this along, and so that's I think 5 is a good number.
Mhm. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your information.
We'll be in touch and look forward
I'll get you
to-
those phone numbers in a minute.
Great.
I just need to conclude the meeting, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Of course, there's none. We are adjourned at 6:55. Thank you and good evening.